go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming. Maybe we're at the after lunch break or lunch break right now. Really appreciate everybody coming out for this. We're here today to talk about DevOps Center, our new product, and we're going to be talking about practical use cases with that. Speakers that we have, I'm really excited with the panel that we've got here today. My name is Karen Fidelic. I'm a product manager here at Salesforce. I work on our developer services team. I have been working for the past few years on a DevOps Center product that is to solve our problem around change and release management with Salesforce development. I've been at Salesforce for about 5 years, working within our developer experience group that entire time. I'm really excited to have with me today John Eichstedt, who is from Marcus & Millichap. This is a customer that we have who has been part of our pilot and our closed beta that we're running right now with this product. He's got this product that he's using, has his hands on, and he's going to talk to us today about how that experience has been. We've also got Ian Gotts and Adrian Kane from Elements Cloud. They're one of our ISV partners, and they're building an extension right now to work with this DevOps Center product that we're building. So again, really excited to share how this product is going to be used more broadly within the Salesforce ecosystem. They're going to each talk about their experience and how they're doing it. So before we get started, I'm sure you've seen this. You see this a lot this week. We just need to remind you to please make your purchasing and investment decisions based on currently available product. What we're going to be talking about today is definitely forward-looking. So I'm going to start by talking about this DevOps Center product. This is a product that we have been working on for the last few years. It's currently in a closed beta. We have a booth right out here on the floor where you can go see an extensive demo on it and see it in action. I'm going to go through today kind of what our background is, why we're building this product, what it's about, give a quick overview of the features and functionality, and then I'm going to hand it over, and these folks are going to talk about their use of the product. One of the things that I really want to get out of this session is that this product is in fact real. There are real people using it. I know we've been talking about it for a few years, but it is actually happening. Our plan is to launch by the end of this year. So what are we doing and why? When we talk about lifecycle management here at Salesforce, we look at this as a process that is probably fairly standard and familiar to you. This is a cyclical process where we have a planning phase, and a coding, making changes phase, testing phase as you're making changes, as you're building your application, and finally release. And over the years, we have been working on products, services, and tooling to support this standard industry standard process. Salesforce DX, you might be familiar with that terminology. That's a suite of products that we've been working on for the last several years to deliver a more modern development experience for developers on the Salesforce platform. So things like the CLI, different types of environments, sandboxes, scratch orgs, the ability to support continuous integration and delivery, automation, bringing source control to the forefront, really basing the entire experience around a source-driven model. We've been working on all these tools, and really the intent here is to bring a more modern, traditional software development experience to the Salesforce platform. Now, this set of functionality that we've delivered over the years has started off really being focused on the programmatic developer, the sort of pro devs who are very familiar and accustomed to modern software practices. What we have found over the years, or where we basically are now, is that we have declarative users still, admin users, who have kind of been left behind in this experience as we've been working through Salesforce DX. So we're trying to now bring an experience that satisfies both the low-code, admin, declarative developers, along with those pro-code developers. Bring that modern experience to everyone, and also allow them to work together using those modern best practices. So that's what DevOps Center is about, and that's why we are building this product. So when we look at this experience, and we sort of look at our 4 key pillars of our vision around this, it's again about bringing modern release management to the entire developer community. Our first pillar here is about providing an improved declarative experience. So said another way, this is to provide a better alternative than we have today with change sets. So anybody who has been using change sets, hopefully you're jumping up and down and cheering. We fully acknowledge that they need a severe overhaul, and this is one of the key goals with this product. Again, we also want to support these hybrid or fusion teams. These are teams that include both low-code and pro-code developers, as well as different various roles within the team: testers, developers, business stakeholders, all working together collaboratively. We want to democratize DevOps, bring that modern best practices, source control, automation, testing, CI/CD to everyone in an accessible way. And then finally, platform extensibility. So ultimately, this should support and be the release management platform for the entire Salesforce set of platform tools that we have, including all of our various clouds that we offer within the Salesforce developer experience. Additionally, and this is kind of very relevant to what we're talking about today, extensibility across our ecosystem. So you'll see today that Elements has been able to extend their product to support a flow that brings DevOps Center and Elements Cloud together, and that's really exciting for us. Not only for this particular product, which is very cool, but also just in general around the idea of having these extensions within our ecosystem that can pull together the DevOps Center experience that we're building with other platform Salesforce ecosystem products that exist out there. So this is what the product looks like. Again, I'm going to go through high-level features and functions here, but we have a demo booth right out here, and I highly encourage you to go out and take a look at that. At a high level here, what we are looking at is, again, bringing modern change and release management to everyone within the Salesforce developer community. We are going to be delivering a more modern, easy-to-use experience around tracking changes and requirements as they go through the overall lifecycle process. So we're using the same source tracking capability that we have today in our CLI. Changes that you make in a sandbox or scratch org are going to be automatically tracked and listed in this UI so that you can see those changes. You don't need to manually keep track of them like you do the change sets today. You can individually select them and move those forward in your flow. Also have introduced the concept of what we call a work item, which is that requirement. It's that ticket. Is a fundamental piece of our overall data model. We're tracking those changes associated with the requirement or a work item. And this is really relevant because, again, when you see what Elements is doing, they are using that work item as the conduit, as the connection point between our experience and what they are doing on the sort of further left part of the flow. We've also built source control into this experience very tightly. One of the premises of this product is that source control is required. We think this is such an important part of a modern and robust development experience that it is now required to use source control if you are using this product. That said, we've made it very easy. We don't expect you to have to know how to use source control. We don't expect that you're experienced with the source control system yet, but we have provided a seamless integration to allow you to get your source, your metadata, out of an org, into a source control repository, and manage throughout the lifecycle process with that. We've also built a configurable deployment pipeline. So this whole thing is really about moving changes through a lifecycle. So we have a click-based deployment pipeline that you can set up through any number of stages from development through multiple stages of testing into production. You can then, with simple clicks, move your changes through that pipeline. Super easy. And then finally, you don't have to use this UI in order to manage those changes. So if you have teams that have programmatic, people working outside of the, or prefer to work outside of the UI, are using the CLI, are using version control directly today, they can continue to do that. The beauty here is that then we can bring our declarative developers along, get them using this DevOps Center, get that source into the repository so that it's all being managed in one place. Teams can work collaboratively. All those changes as they're moving through the pipeline are going to be reflected, whether or not the changes are being moved and migrated from a CLI, for instance, or from a DevOps, within DevOps Center. So this is really the idea of bringing those teams together, getting everybody onto a modern experience that they can work collaboratively with. All right, that is the overview of the product. I'm now going to hand it over to John, who's going to talk about his experience using this product. Super excited to hear what you have to say, John. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Karen.
I hope he says good things.
A little Hi there, my name is John Hegstad. I'm the platform owner and solution architect for Marks and Melchap. I've been building on the Salesforce platform since 2013. And even back then, I worked with a really great developer. And he implemented source control. and I was lost, had no idea what to do. Still to this day, even though I've like looked into it, I'm still not sure like what the different commit or merge types are, you know. So I've always wanted to be able to have admins working source and admins and devs working the same way. And so when I first heard the rumors about DevOps Center a few years ago at Dreamforce, I was really interested and couldn't wait to play with it and be one of the testers for it. So I was really excited to get on the pilot and into the beta. And what I want to tell you is it really is actually for everybody. It's not just for devs, not just for admins. I actually have a business sponsor who's a pretty good power user, and we were building an application for his department. And he wanted to be able to actually control his own page layouts. Well, that part you picked up was able to do, but being able to put it into a change set was a little more complicated, took more time to teach him. I showed him DevOps Center. I haven't had to use it yet, but being able to go make the change and add it to work on the DevOps Center was actually really easy for him. So it's not just us on the more technical side, but if you have those power users who are part of the building of a feature application, you can actually have them go make changes in that sandbox, with the developer sandbox, and add it to a work item for you to then promote up. That was one of the things that had me really think it was going to be fantastic for all our users. A couple of nice features that I really used and like how they work. First is the multiple pipelines. You can set it up however you want. Maybe for us, there's a hotfix pipeline, because you always want something that can kind of push things through quickly. Pipelines for different features. As Elements has we'll probably talk about high risk, medium risk, low risk pipelines, so that you can kind of have different cycles of testing throughout. The other piece is bundling. Sometimes it's really important as you're putting stuff through and doing all your testing. Once it gets to a certain point in the pipeline, you want everything to move forward together. We tested all this, now it's moving together for the next stage of testing for full release. Or you did all the testing, now it needs to move together for the full release. And then sometimes if you're doing low risk changes or you're doing hot fixes, you don't want to bundle, because when this thing's ready to move, okay, we have this problem fixed, you want to push that straight up. So you have control over things like that by pipeline. I thought that was a really great thing. You also have the separation of roles, right? You can say who can create pipelines, who can manage those pipelines. Different people can do the releases. I know some of you probably have compliance, whether it's SOX or something else, where the person who does the work can't be the person who releases the work, things like that. It supports those. You also might want to have somebody doing the releases who can actually check to make sure there's not conflicts first, knows how to kind of look into those repository pieces. And then this is what has made me excited as I'm using it. It's what I hope to get out of it. Two were things I hoped, and one was just the added bonus. I'm sure anybody who's used change sets is enjoying things that has gotten to the version 12, version 13, version 14 as they fail, and you have to, this field's missing, this one's missing, this test class failed, now I need to have something this kind of gets rid of that. As you make your changes, you can actually go and see your changes and select from the things that changed to put in. So you're not going back and having to remember everything. That was huge for me. Really loved it. Everything in source. As I said, using source controls and admin, I'm still not there, and I've worked on it for years, and I'd like to think I'm pretty smart, but still just haven't quite gotten this. There's nothing for me to learn. Right? We set it up, and now everything goes through source. And then the bundling, that was actually a really great thing that I wasn't expecting. And just for that, okay, all these things need to move together. Really clean, keeps it clean. And that, I'm sure I'm gonna dig in and find more as we use it more. Again, I mostly have been testing with it, although I do push stuff through to production that I'm working on, just to get it through source and see how it works and make sure that it's gonna actually fit the needs going forward. So that's it for me. I'm gonna pass it off to Ian Gotts, so he can tell you about how Elements Cloud is extending Elements and DevOps Center.
Thank you, John. So the fantastic thing was that John was a client of Elements before DevOps Center, so actually it was a case of actually bringing two things together and actually seeing how 2 and 2 equals 22, not 4. So a little bit about Elements. Elements, we're all about capturing all the knowledge that you need that institutional knowledge of all the changes that gets made over time. So it's really about how do you make sure that we build the right things before we start going into the dev cycle. So if you think about that from capturing the requirements, mapping out business processes, building ERDs, and then the most important thing probably in all of this is we're pulling all the metadata out of an org and building that metadata dictionary, but then doing all the dependency analysis. So you've actually got some real insights into what got built before. That org discovery piece if you want. But as Karen said, the pivotal part in this is actually the user story. So you build a user story, maybe with the stakeholders, the business analysts. You build those user stories, and that's where the integration or the interface goes with DevOps Center, because there's a concept of a work item. So a user story can have more than one. It can have one or many work items associated with it. So a piece of work, a user story, so I want to, so that I can, that description of the work can then be defined into a number of work items, and as John said, those work items may live in different pipelines. So that ability to aggregate all of that and actually see where that work's got to. So that's why DevOps Center, we're about building the right things, making sure that you decide exactly what should be built. How many times have you built something and then the end user went, that's not what I wanted? Pretty much everybody. Some of that is down to, did we ask all the questions and really bottom out what was required before we got started? So what's that's about building the right things? Build the things right is about driving this through the pipeline, the source control, in a nice managed way. So I wanted to show you a couple of screenshots of the integration we built. I'm the CEO, I've been around Salesforce for 20 years. I wave my arms around. I'm going to hand over to Adrian, who's the CTO, who actually made this thing happen. And he'll show you actually how it got built and talk about the experience of building it. So there's DevOps Center. And on the left-hand side, you can see Elements.cloud has popped up in the right-hand side. And it knows that this user story is actually associated with this work item. Let me go into a bit more detail. So it's a bit bigger, you can see it there. So you can see in that panel, at the very top, you've got information about the user story, the risk. That's all the things that you'll be collecting as you're building the user story with your end users. That little three-pronged thing is the impact analysis. That's where, as a business user with the team, you'll start to identify either the new metadata items that you may be creating, the proposed ones, or maybe the existing ones. But we've got this new section which is all about DevOps Center. And this is where you can see the relationship between work items, and you can see that there are 4 work items there, the relationship between the work items and that one user story. And then the other really cool thing we've done is we've then worked out all the metadata items that are on all those user stories, all the metadata items that are on those work items, and the ones that are proposed. And they're all the ones down in committed and uncommitted. So we're starting to aggregate you and give you a picture of, for these work items, these are the metadata items that are on them, and then you can start to see conflicts. So this is all about discovering the problems before you get to them. Change sets is you're excited when we go through. We want DevOps Center allows us to get them. You should be disappointed when it doesn't go through. So it's changing a whole mindset, which is really why we love DevOps Center. But as I said, we're also aggregating all the knowledge. So here you can see that there's a process map, a UPN process map that's connected to that user story. So again, all those stakeholders who are working on that work item get a lot more context. That could be a process map, it could be notes, it could be linked to a specification, it could be an architecture diagram, it could be anything. But again, it's giving you the context for all those stakeholders who are working on that work item, so there's less ambiguity, they're more likely to build the right thing. And that will, if you do that, then adoption will soar. You're building the stuff that people really need, not what they thought they wanted. But you've also got access to all the metadata. So I talked about org analysis, all that information that we're building for you when we do a sync with the org. Here you can see a dependency tree. So we've identified that for that one item, that field, these are all the places it's used. Which is great, but actually, these are all the places that it's then used. So I can see that it's used in one Slack flow, it's used in MuleSoft in 3 places, it's used in 2 Apex classes, but then I can keep on opening up and opening up. Really interesting, because now you understand the impact of change. What comes out of that is, number one, how much do you have to get involved in testing? If it's really complex, we need to apply more resources. If we know it's really simple, and we're confident it's simple, then we can actually take it through a faster pipeline. The second thing is obviously we can make sure that everything's included. It's great, yeah, we made those changes, but didn't realise that actually something in MuleSoft kicked off something in NetSuite. And then maybe we don't discover that till the year end, and then it's all too late. So again, this is all about giving you a lot more confidence to make changes quickly. So really, I'd like to hand over to Adrian here, and Adrian can talk about how we built the integration.
Thanks, Ian. As Ian said, I'm Adrian King, I'm CTO at Elements, and I was incredibly excited back in the last year when we managed to get on the DevOps Center pilot as it was, because I saw an enormous opportunity for combining the knowledge which we collect in Elements with the power of actually moving stuff in a much more controlled fashion through the development, through the pipeline. The objective was, as I said, to enhance the DevOps Center with rigorous analysis and to make sure it's easy to implement alongside DevOps Center. And so the analysis part is making sure we build the right thing, development is about build the thing right. So how do we actually go about the integration? The great news was it didn't actually take very much. There's quite a lot of work in building the actual integration. Getting to the point where we could build the integration took us 2-3 days of detailed understanding of how to do it. And to be honest, we really needed very little effort from the DevOps Center team. We basically went and really understood the DevOps Center data model. We then went and really understood the process that DevOps Center was supporting. And from that, we were able to actually go and build an initial prototype, took it to the DevOps Center team, and I think it'd be fair to say, Karen, that you're pretty impressed by how, with virtually no effort, and anybody can do this, I believe. So as any ISV partner, any partner out there who wants to build an integration, it's actually very easy to do. You know, a little bit of understanding of DevOps Center, and you can actually start to go and build some really interesting extensions on top of this, what I believe is going to be one of the core infrastructure products which Salesforce provides. Once we actually understood the mechanisms, how it worked, and actually I'm going to shout out to my colleague Rick at the back of the room there, who I wave my hands around, and Rick actually does all the hard work and the heavy lifting, to be honest. We then actually basically built the, extended the Elements product, extended the extension, built the extension package to put into Salesforce, but then also updated Elements itself and our Chrome extension. I think the other really important thing is that Elements also integrates with Jira. So actually, this is basically a high-level view of the architecture stack here. You know, we've got in our space, which is basically our tenancy. You've got the user stories. Backing link to the work items. One of the critical things which we believe we do is that when you create a story and create a work item, but as it goes down the pipeline, you might find issues. And at that point, you can't change the work item. You create another work item to handle defects. We do that aggregation together. So there's a one-to-many relationship between the user story and work item. We're clearly pulling in Elements. We actually sync the metadata from the org into our product. And then also we allow you to actually integrate Jira into this picture. So the ability to actually take and Jira being, we can also do work with clients with Azure DevOps as well, but Jira is the one that we've got the tightest integration with at the moment. The ability to bring these three products together to give a unified experience where you can actually share information with all the different stakeholders. And I think John picked up on a really important thing, which is this is about ensuring that all the stakeholders involved, the admins, the developers, the release managers, the platform owners in your case, all have got access to understand how well the process is running right at the moment. So what I want to do is actually hand back to John, who's had actually experience of working with both products together, just to give a quick overview of have we actually achieved our objective with where it really matters. So over to you, John.
So when we started using DevOps Center and Elements separately, we also more recently started using Jira as well. And so having that all work together was actually something that was really exciting. And one of the key things is, being every person on the team being able to work where they work. So if you work in Jira, you can work in Jira. If you generally work in Elements, you can do it in Elements. If you just work in Salesforce, you can do it in Salesforce. It all goes to the same places, and you can see everything everywhere. When I'm working with a stakeholder and we have stuff attached, we can be in Jira, we can be looking at our roadmap in Jira, be looking at again about where we're at. When there's a question about something, we can pull it up, we can show them those relationships. This is why this is going to take 2 weeks, because these are all the dependencies here. There's a lot of testing involved. And having that tool, having it right there, having it connected where we're showing the stakeholder, was a really great benefit. The other piece is, you can go through the process maps, from the process map, creating this is what the users want, right? This is what the process has to look like. Now I can go, okay, well, what do we need to build? That's where I build the user stories. Create those, attach it to existing metadata or add proposed metadata. Now we have that, we attach that to work items. Now we have the thing from start to finish. We know what they wanted, what we need to build, what we're building, and then it's built. So we kind of go, start to finish. It kind of completes that cycle, because prior to tying this together, we didn't have that same connectivity between them to see, where is it? Once we have it in Jira, we can close the ticket, but we're not actually seeing, hey, this metadata was part of this story, and it was deployed yesterday. So it's really nice to have that full life cycle. And that's kind of the big thing. It really tied everything together for our process. A number of people on my team, including my boss, did not come from the IT background. My boss was a TV and film producer, and then a commercial real estate agent for over a decade, and then got into Salesforce, building it out for his real estate team. So the way he thinks is different, and he really wanted that full life cycle. And this gave it to us, and we've been seeing that in action really the last couple of weeks as we started actually using the integration with Elements and DevOps Center to kind of complete that cycle. And I will hand it back over to Karen.
All right. So to wrap up here, first I just want to thank these guys again. I think this is really validating for our team here who's building DevOps Center. I've actually got a bunch of my developers in the back here who are building this product. And the fact that we have real customers using it is super exciting. The fact that we also have partners who are able to extend it right now is also super exciting. And I want to reinforce what Adrian said. If there's any ISVs in the audience here, or anybody who actually just wants to dabble with building extensions and integrations, they really did not, I told them up front, we'd love to work with you guys. We have no bandwidth right now to support you. The engineering team is heads down trying to get this product out the door by the end of this year. We are not going to have any bandwidth to actually work with you or any other partners to do integration work. And they said, okay, and they went off and came back with a prototype, and it was awesome, right? So one of my key messages here is that is possible, and I highly encourage any other partners, ISVs who are out here to consider doing this. It's just going to broaden and strengthen our ecosystem, and I hope if anything, this just proves that it's definitely feasible to do. So again, I thank you all for your time and your participation in this program. It really means a lot to us on this team. As far as demos and more information, so both DevOps Center and Elements have booths right out here with demos going on, so feel free to go look at those products in more detail. Our teams will be there answering questions. This Trailblazer community group is the best place for us, for you all to keep updated with the product and the product progress. So we'll be announcing things like our upcoming open beta availability on there. We are targeting a June timeframe for an open beta, and we'll be announcing that on there. So that's the best place to go to stay up to date. Then this implementation guide, this is a link to an in-progress implementation guide, is that a fair statement? That Ian and the team here at Elements is helping put together. It's going to give information about how to get started with these tools and these processes. So again, super appreciate the help and support that we're getting on this overall initiative. I think with that, we can open it up for some Q&A. Is there going to be a mic passed around?
Thank you. So first of all, that's very interesting. Thank you a lot. So from what I've heard, there are limitations around which version control DevOps Center supports as of right now.
Yep, which version control provider we support. So right now we're supporting GitHub, cloud-based, GitHub hosted GitHub. That's likely, our plan right now is for GA, that's what we'll have. We will be following that up with integration to Bitbucket is our plan. Our plan is to do Bitbucket next. We're also looking at GitLab, Azure Git, and enterprise on-prem GitHub as Bitbucket as needed and those as well. So we're going to kind of just roll them out in order of how many people are using each one. And for right now, that looks like to us as Bitbucket is next. Given that this is a requirement to use the product, it is very important to us that we get that support rolled out across all the different tools that people will be using.
And do you have any roadmap dates in mind with safe harbor in mind?
Roadmap dates?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as far as those features are just the release of the product. So the release of the product, our plan right now is to GA this before the end of the year. So we're saying like fall timeframe. Like I said, we'll have an open beta during the summer. And then these features like Bitbucket, other features that'll come, those will come post GA. If you want more specifics on that, you'll have to stay tuned.
Thank you.
Is this going to be a part of the platform, or is it an extra licensed product?
So the DevOps Center will be a free and included part of the platform for anybody using professional, enterprise, unlimited editions. So given that this is intended to be a replacement for change sets, anywhere that you have change sets today, the idea is that this will be available.
Hey, thank you. So I'm a big fan of scratch orgs, just like the ability to use them, the ability to create ephemeral environments, make them promotional as possible. What does that look like in the DevOps Center? Is it like pretty much one-for-one from where we're looking at the sandbox?
So scratch orgs is the question, right? Okay. So right now, what we're supporting, our sort of first use case is what we call an org-based development model. So that's where you're just moving arbitrary sets of metadata through from org to org. The typical use case there is if you're using a development sandbox for development. Scratch orgs are just sandboxes, really. So you can, in fact, connect Scratch org to the DevOps Center and use it for development. What we don't have yet is like the ability to create a Scratch org from DevOps Center or to load it with source. So if you can get that Scratch org created and loaded with the source that you want, you can absolutely connect that and use that as a development environment within DevOps Center. Now we will be adding more native support for Scratch orgs in the future, and that's going to come most likely when we start supporting a package-based development model, because that's the more typical development environment that you're going to use with package-based development. So that'll be coming post-GA for us.
Thank you.
One, two. The DevOps Center comes in as a managed package, is that right?
Yes.
And the work item object, it's just like any custom object.
It's a
It
custom
supports all
object.
the triggers, flows, and all of the above.
Yeah, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there are 16 custom objects, 16, 18 custom objects. I can't remember exactly how many, something like that. I mean, it is a package, and that's what we did. We basically reverse engineered it. We ran a bunch of data through it. We just got to understand how it worked. We understand. I mean, data model's interesting. I mean, it's not trivial, but it's certainly a reverse engineer in a day or two. We then run a lot of data through it in terms of different scenarios, etc., to really understand the processes supported and stuff. Yeah, that's the joy. It's Salesforce.
Yeah, so all the good stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
one thing to add to that. So we do have thoughts and plans to actually document the data model and like provide interfaces for. What are you doing? Yes. Okay.
I can sell you a data model.
What's that?
I can sell you a data model. We've already
There, Alex can sell you a data model. Yes, but going back to the point of like, I told them, we don't have that yet. Like, we have not had any time to do this. We have not put resources into this. That has not been our primary focus. It is possible to do it now with a little bit more effort, and in the future, we do expect that we'll actually document this and have sort of more of a formal program around an ISV extension model. But again, key messages is actually possible to do today in the absence of that.
So it is very possible. It probably took us 3 days of work in total to get to the point where we felt we really understood, and Rick and myself could actually design what we wanted. I mean, that's not a lot of effort for the value that you're getting from this. So, it really is it is easy to go and do something as a partner. And, I understood Karen was, we just don't have time to support you. That's fine. We'll just do it ourselves. It's very doable.
I have one here. Since project management tools are so integral to the CI/CD, is there any sort of roadmap for integrating into like the Salesforce connector through a Jira or one of those tools that's going to tie directly into this, or is that going to be an option? Because I know it's pretty limited with the objects you can get through that.
Yeah. So that is a roadmap item for us, integration with work tracking tools like Jira. Again, if we look at kind of where the population is, Jira is probably going to be the first one that we look at doing something like that with. We're also looking at doing something with Agile Accelerator, which is the Salesforce. I think it's available on Salesforce Labs, but it's basically a work tracking system that we've built internally. So yes, that is the plan. Our intention, I usually say, our intention has never been to be a fully robust, fully functioning work tracking tool. We're trying to not reinvent that wheel, but acknowledge that absolutely you're going to want to use one. And so we will provide some hooks to really just kind of make, the goal I think will be to maintain synchronization between them, and that will be coming. It's going to be post-GA.
Couple of questions. Does it support multi-org? Like we have 11 orgs, so does one org setup has to be done in each org, or one org can be made and it goes through different orgs?
So when you say multiple orgs, you're talking like multiple production orgs where you're trying to manage metadata dependencies. So we are not supporting that sort of through the same pipeline that we have built today. So within a project, you have basically one production org and any number of sandboxes feeding into that, any number of development orgs. I'm hearing this more and more, so I think it's something we'll be looking at is what do we need to do to support that cross org. I think we'll be looking at it, and I take it that this is something that I'm hearing more and more about.
All right. And the release management access, right? What level of granular access do we have on pipelines? Is it at a pipeline level, or if I have release management access, I have access to all the pipelines?
Yeah, so if I understand the question, if you're a release manager, which stages do you have access to making a deployment to? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Right.
Yeah. So we do not have the granular control within DevOps Center on a per stage basis right now. So we can control whether you can do, we call it promotion, which is basically moving the changes from one stage to the next, whether you can do that or not. But it's not at the stage level right now. That said, the controls that you have in the org that you're deploying to will still prevent anybody who doesn't have modified metadata access in that org from doing a deployment there.
And things like static code analysis or running the automation test suite and stuff, is that integrated?
Yeah, so as far as testing static analysis, so the testing that we have support for today is Apex testing, similar to what you've got with metadata deploys today. So those tests get run as part of the deploy. That's also sort of a post-GA feature area that we'll be looking at is more integration, more support for other types of testing environments and testing frameworks, as well as integrating things like static analysis. So that I would say is kind of a next year thing for us to really look at testing. Like testing as a first class thing within the experience and how we can handle that. Thank you. Yeah.
For us, our developers don't have access to production orgs,
Yes.
so if we have to have BAs, QAs, and devs in there, it's going to be a lot more licenses potentially.
Yeah. So DevOps Center is a managed package that gets installed into a business. Typically, it's going to be your production org. In order to use DevOps Center, all you need is we have that free unlimited or free limited access license. You can use that in order to get access to DevOps Center. From there, you're going to connect to your development orgs and your sandboxes for deployment, and so you'll need whatever access you need there. But within the org itself, where DevOps Center lives, and in order to use it, you only need that free limited access license.
Hey, thank you. Sorry. So this is more like a selfish thing. Is there like a, do you have any thoughts of like a supporting like, here's the best way to use DevOps Center as you're like taking your DevOps Center journey? I feel sometimes a lot of the pain points that this tool is meant to support are from practices that are just not healthy. Like, I would create a change set with 50 items. Well, there you go. That's going to be really hard to manage.
Yeah, so I think you're getting at just sort of like best practices when it comes to the process. So I would love for us to put together better documentation and guidance around that. And maybe this guide that we're going to be working together on can help us with that. So that's something that we'll work with our docs team on that. I will say that one of the philosophies we've had in building this is to try to keep it pretty narrowly focused and sort of prescribed in such a way that we're trying to sort of guide you down what we consider the recommended path. And so you might not have all the flexibility in the world to create, any kind of branching structure that you want. And that's, partly from a sort of, we're starting with an MVP approach, and partly from a, this is what we recommend. And so we're gonna try to guide you and steer you in that way. So we're doing it both from sort of how we build the product, as well as I do want to get to some more of that higher level best practice kind of documentation.
So the scope of that implementation guide is going to be, first of all, what are DevOps principles? Because we've got some people in the ecosystem who are going, what is source control, what is Git? So we need to get some of those principles in the scope set. It is about best practices, but then we say, what step by step, what do you need to do to implement DevOps Center? So really, I think it's the reason for putting the guide together and working with Karen's team is, how do we actually get that best practice out of the ecosystem, get it in, and then get it locked in, so people can get from the nightmare of change sets to actually really feeling comfortable that you're driving through a pipeline and you've implemented good source control, and you've implemented some best practices about how, rather than just going, I've just taken change sets and I've just replaced it, how do we actually take everyone a step further on and actually move the ecosystem into real source code development, and actually some of the things that John talked about, actually getting those best practices baked in. So that's the aim of it. If we don't do that, then we miss the point in terms of the guide.